Hey guys, it's Greg Towne, host of the podcast Go Time, where every week I sit down with some of the top leaders of their industries and professions, and they share with you how they became the trendsetters of their industries. It's Go Time. Well, hello everybody. This is Greg Towne, host of the podcast Go Time, where I get to sit down with the industry leaders and movers and shakers and people that are absolutely at the top of their game and the top of their business once a week, and they share with you what they've done to get themselves to where they're at, what they're seeing in the industry, and to share with you some of the successes and what they, what you should and should be doing stuff. This week, I get the pleasure of sitting down with somebody that I think I first met you a couple of years ago. I was actually
probably about 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. I was in I'll call it a preview, an introductory to your type of training, your style of training, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. I think it's one of the best types of trainings, especially for team building or for corporate America or for in that aspect and stuff. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to Aaron Schmookler with the Yes Works.
Thanks for that introduction.
Awesome. Well, so Aaron, I love hearing about how people get started in the path of entrepreneurship, how people get started in what they're doing and stuff. So share with us how you got into, how your path progressed.
Sure. I can tell you that in some ways it started when I was a senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine asked me what I was doing for the summer after high school, and I said, I don't know. And he said, why don't you come and work at the summer camp that I am going to be working at? And I said, I don't know what I would do. And he said, why don't you be on camping staff? Because he knew I was interested in outdoors stuff. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I said yes. I had a brief interview, and they hired me. And here I was, not yet 18, and I was going to be leading a bunch of early teenagers through the woods of Massachusetts, which now seems like an incredibly reckless thing for a camp director to hire me to do at that age, but that was my job. And on my first trip, the kids, many of them started off grumbling and anxious about the woods and the bugs and the effort. And for the most part, I think I did a pretty good job before we got to the trailhead of turning that around and got those who were pumped even more pumped, those who were a little trepidatious, kind of pumped, and those who were really anxious, at least willing. Mm-hmm. And then we got to hiking up the mountainside. And it didn't take long for one of the people who actually was reasonably pumped at the beginning to decide, that's it, I'm done. Mm-hmm. I'm exhausted. My pack is too heavy. I'm never going to get there. Forget it, I quit. And she sat down on a rock and would not budge. Mm-hmm. And I tried everything I could think of to cajole, to inspire, to pressure, to peer pressure, to threaten. I tried everything I could to get her to stand up and keep walking. I said things like, the bus is gone. We're not going to see another bus for 20 miles in 5 days, so it's time to get hoofing. And nothing I said had any effect except maybe to entrench her further into her seat on the rock. So I said, I'll tell you what, I need a break from this. And I took a few steps down the trail just to kind of breathe and collect my thoughts and rack my brain to see if I could come up with another strategy. And while I was doing that, her friends gathered around and started taking things out of her pack and putting them in their own packs, and basically physically lightened her load. Mm-hmm. And that was a really important lesson in leadership for me, both in terms of what it takes to sometimes motivate somebody, what it may really be that keeps people from being motivated is not necessarily what they say. And in addition, I would say that an important part of what I learned was, if you're committed to getting the whole group there, wherever there is, then it doesn't matter how many people are pumped. If one person is a no, you're in trouble. So, so it's an important lesson in leadership. It got me into a real fascination with and a deep passion for good leadership, because I was a better leader for the rest of that trip, thanks to her being a terrible follower. And so I've been grateful to her for a long time. That got me started in my interest in leadership. Specifically, the Yes Works was born before my daughter was born. My wife called me up and said, "Hey, you need to know something. I'm pregnant." And they tell you that your life is going to change when you have kids. And that seemed obvious to me, like true on the face of it. Your life is going to change. I didn't know that my life was going to change simply because my wife was pregnant, or in the ways that it did. And one of the ways that it changed was the bumper stickers that say TGIF and the mugs that say "I hate Mondays" went from being kind of a representation of what was too bad. Oh, it's too bad that people don't like work, to suddenly becoming intolerable. And almost immediately, I just could not tolerate the fact that so many people hate work, and that 20 years from now, when my daughter enters the workforce, that she's going to be more likely to find affinity with her fellows by hating work than she is to find affinity with people by, for instance, gratitude and pleasure at the fact that they can make a contribution. And so I want my daughter to live in a world where she loves work, where she's likely to find affinity with her fellow man, if I may use the colloquialism, by loving having the ability to make a contribution. So I thought, what is the biggest lever I can push on to make a difference in work culture? And this was it. This being essentially using tools and techniques from theater improv to train teams to build themselves. And another way that I think about it is, we help make people good for work, and we help make work good for people.
Oh, interesting. And and that's part of the reason why I wanted to sit down with you and have you kind of share with our audience out there, our listeners and stuff, because there's a lot of different. I see, depending on the industry you're in, there's a ton of different training companies out there. And so, I mean, and I love how you guys tie in theater and improv. Could you dive in a little bit more in that aspect of how you help take the skills from there and put it into team building and sales training?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked, because people hear what I just told you and often think, oh, they do improv or they do theater. If I go through one of their workshops, I'm going to have to act. I'm going to have to be quick, witty, funny, or zany, like all the things that you might think of if you know the improv show Whose Line Is It Anyway? We don't do any of that. We don't ask you to be quick, witty, funny, or zany. We don't ask you to act. There is no theater in our training. There is, however, the tools and techniques from theater improv. These are principles that a lot of us are familiar with. Principles like got your back. Principles like celebrating failure. Principles like whatever it is, whatever interaction you and I are having is about the relationship, not about the thing. So, for example, if I'm going to sell you something, well, if that's my objective, you're going to pick up on it. In fact, right before we started talking on air, we were talking off air about a sales manager at an auto dealership who told me he wanted to sell me a car. And I said, well, then we're done.
Yeah.
Because the guy who sold me my last car said, how can I help you? Right? And that was clearly his attitude, was I'm here to help you. Maybe I can sell you a car. Maybe that will help. So it's always about the relationship and never about the thing. Now, the fact that we know these principles, we know that it may be good to celebrate failure instead of getting down in the dumps about it. We know that it's good to have somebody else's back. We know that there is, one of the other principles of improv is there is useful information everywhere. Every experience you have is useful information. The tone of voice of somebody that you're working with or interacting with or making a deal with, their tone of voice is information just as much as the words that they're speaking. We all know these things, but it takes practice to embody them. So there's a lot of training out there that will talk to you about the same principles that are important to us at the Yes Works, but there are very few that will drill them. So we don't talk to you that much, in fact, at all about these principles. We have created exercises that put you through 100 reps in an hour. So when you leave, the blockages that you may have had to celebrating failure or to having somebody's back or to putting relationships first have started to be deconstructed by all these reps, and new habits that incorporate those principles have begun. And we've actually changed the structure of your brain. The neurons that fire together wire together according to neuroscience. So we get neurons of celebration firing at the same times as you have the neurons of failure firing. You do that enough times, and those neurons are forever, maybe a little bit strong, but I'll say it anyway, forever linked. So if you used to be inhibited by failure, after you work with us, you are at least less inhibited by failure, less inhibited by the fear of failure, less stymied by the failures that you experience, and most importantly, I think, less sensitive to failure in public, failure in front of other people, failure in front of clients, prospects, and coworkers.
Gotcha. Interesting. Let's talk about when you saw that there was a need in the marketplace for this type of training, and then you tie that into the discovery that was it your firstborn child, or
yeah,
your wife was
first and so far only
first and only child.
Looking forward to more.
Share with us a little bit. What was it like to get started? In the early days and stuff when you first when you and your team first started bringing this out there to your marketplace.
Well, it was scary. Right? I mean, there's all sorts of possibility of failure. Yeah. But because of my training as an improviser, it was also really exciting. So I looked forward to every day. I celebrated every failure, and I celebrated every little success. And that's another aspect that I really appreciate about my own improv training is that I'm really sensitive to success. So even having somebody say, "Oh, tell me more about that," when I would tell them about my business, that was a success for me. Even if they at the end said, "You know what, I don't think that's for me, thanks very much." The fact that they said, "Tell me more," was a success. So early days, there was a lot of micro success, a little bit of macro success, and an awful lot of hard work.
Gotcha.
Right, and I for the first 6 months, it was almost impossible for me to put my attention on anything else, which is why I'm glad I kind of got started when my wife was pregnant, because then there was a baby to give a lot of my attention to. And my attention was split, I'll admit, because I became so passionate about changing the way people experience work, and also about changing how people work. My favorite teachers, if I look back, have been the teachers that challenged me, that pushed me, that told me I was capable of more. Those were teachers who loved me. The teachers who did not push me, I can see with my adult mind, were more indifferent. They were indifferent to me. I was another cog or another kid on the assembly line. And I've found in my work life that the bosses that I've really appreciated also have been the bosses who've pushed me, who've demanded more, who've told me I'm capable of more, and who have held a high standard for me. And both in my schooling and in my work life, I've been not alone in loving those people, but certainly rare. That a lot of the people around me have hated the teachers who pushed us and demanded more, have hated the bosses who've pushed us and demanded more. And I hope to give people access to the love for that kind of pressure that I have.
It's amazing. I agree with you 100% on that. I think back of the teachers that I had that in the moment, the high school Greg probably didn't really care for them, or I look at like my military experience, the drill sergeants and the military leaders that, man, they pushed me a lot. Man, they pushed and they demanded a lot. And how I look back at them now, Actually, it's like my very first company commander. That it was when I was in the regular army. After I got through all the training and stuff, I reached out to him on LinkedIn and stuff, and just told him, like, I don't know if you remember me or not, but my God, there were days I hated you, but I'm so thankful that I had you as part of my life, and you're part of the reason why I am the way I am today. So
yeah, I mean, you mentioned drill sergeants. I've never been in the military. And I certainly know that there are probably as many ways of being a drill sergeant as there are drill sergeants. And the kind of pressure that I'm talking about is not necessarily the way the movies reflect drill sergeants as shouting in your face and being punishing, but holding that high standard, insisting on that high standard, telling you you're capable of more, even when you say this is the best I've got. That's the kind of pressure that I'm talking about. So not to in any way denigrate your drill sergeants. I wonder how were your drill sergeants? Were they punishing? Were they demeaning, or did you find it more inviting?
It was really interesting because obviously at the beginning, and this is true with any type of military type of training, in the beginning, they're there basically to tear you down, which is not really good in corporate type of training and stuff.
Although there are people who try it.
Yeah, although there are people that try it and stuff. And typically I laugh because, I see a lot of those types of people that think they're in a leadership position. They chase off really good people because they're constantly tearing people down. But in the military, it's like the first part of training is you tear the person down so that you can rebuild them.
Right.
I remember when I was in basic training, Drill Sergeant Wagner, in which, I would love for him to be, a listener of us and stuff. I've actually tried finding him and stuff. I have not been able to find him. But, I remember the beginning part of basic training, he told me point blank, he hated me. His job was to put me out of the Army. And I forget where, it was towards kind of like about the last 25 or last quarter or last third of basic training. I remember the day, it's almost like there was a switch that got flipped. And all of a sudden, Drill Sergeant Wagner, he was still Drill Sergeant Wagner, but he wasn't the hard charging, I'm going to rip your head off and, do whatever and stuff. All of a sudden, he turned more into the mentor. And, he started, and I noticed that he started taking people, literally went from being that aggressive, scary force to that more of that very stern but loving father that will take you underneath his wing and start working with you and molding you and shaping you and stuff. And it is, and now kind of as a more experienced person, especially when, going through the military and understanding that style of training, it's like I now look back on it with a different set of eyes.
Well, I think, when you talk about tearing you down, I don't tend to think of that as wisdom myself, but I think the wisdom underneath that is you come into the Army with crutches, crutches about how you make yourself feel safe. Yes. And we've all got them. Crutches that impact people's work, for example, of defensiveness, right? If I'm not getting the results that I need to get as a salesperson, it's my territory, or the clients don't get it, or marketing isn't giving me the leads that really are useful, right? All these ways of putting accountability somewhere else. That's a crutch.
Yeah.
The people who kill it no matter what their territory, no matter what marketing is giving them in terms of leads, right? They have a different mindset. They have thrown away the crutches and they've said, I've got to walk this path on my own. So what they're doing in the military is they're taking your crutches away. They're ripping them out of your hands, basically. And so our training is designed also to take your crutches away, but to do it by basically holding onto your crutch and saying, you want to get over there? Well, you're going to have to leave your crutch behind because I'm not letting go. Yeah. So it's another approach to the same goal of giving you access to accountability. And a lot of people think of accountability as a dirty word. It's really scary because if I'm responsible for my own success, however we're defining success, right? Whether that's getting into the romantic relationship you want, or meeting your sales goals, or getting into the college or graduate school that you want to, or getting the job that you want to. If I'm accountable to my success, then when I fail, that means that I'm not equal. to the challenge
Yeah.
in some way or another. So that's really scary, to look at yourself as being not equal.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, and the people who really succeed have managed to reach the flip side of that mentality. If I'm accountable, then nobody can get in my way. Nothing can get in my way. I have access to success. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It just means that when I hit a brick wall, it's my job to figure out how to get over, under, around, or through that wall.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that training in improvisation also provides is another crutch that people have is, and this is kind of the dark side of that accountability mindset, is I've got to do it on my own. Mm-hmm. Improv says everything is a resource.
Yeah.
You're a resource to me, Greg, right? If I hit a brick wall and I think, oh, you know what? Greg may have the dynamite that I need, or Greg may have the ladder that I need. Mm-hmm. It's not lacking accountability to go and say, hey, Greg, can I borrow your ladder? Mm-hmm. It is in fact accountability to say, hey, Greg, can I borrow your ladder? Because that's a resource in my world.
Yeah.
You are a resource in my world. I hope to be a resource in yours. That's the everything. It's always about the relationship, mm-hmm. never about the thing. These principles are universally applicable, and they're all of them built on top of each other, woven through each other. You know, if we look at that wall thing again, and we've got this got your back mentality. If I know you've got an improviser's mentality, and I go to ask you to borrow your ladder, mm-hmm. you're going to have the ladder out before I finish my sentence, because you've got that mindset. And you may be more inclined to have that mindset with me because I've got that mindset. Mm-hmm. And so I will have already had your back because I've got this got your back mentality. I already know everything. It's always about the relationship. Yeah. It's never about the thing. So I've built a relationship with you where you would never hesitate to lend me your ladder.
Yeah. I love that. It's more that abundance mindset, as far as there's abundance amount of business, there's abundance amount of stuff to be, clients and stuff to be done, as opposed to the scarcity that there's only X amount of business or X amount of transactions or X amount of people that are going to buy something. And
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. I was listening to your podcast earlier this morning with. Help me with his last name, with AJ.
AJ Poyden, yes.
AJ Poyden. The favorite thing I took away from what he shared with you was the idea that the definition of a miracle is a change in perspective. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was a realtor, and somebody changed my perspective about what it means to be at the top, mm-hmm. right? Where you look at a pyramid, right, and almost all the models of the top are based around this pyramid where there's a lot of people, down at the bottom, and you get slowly mm-hmm. narrower until you're at the top, where there's only room for one at the top because it's mm-hmm. this tiny little point. And the broker at Keller Williams Tacoma at the time said to me, there is tons of room at the top because there's only one person there.
I like that.
And that really made a huge difference for me in terms of thinking about abundance. The closer you get to the top, the more room there is.
Gotcha. Awesome. Tell us a little bit about some of your successes. Tell us about some of those things you look back at, what you and your team have done, that you look back and go, man, that's why I do what I do.
Awesome. So I can tell my favorite story. A team leader here in Tacoma approached us and said, it's not easy to say this, but my team is dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. And so we talked to him a little bit, got to understand some of the workings of the team, or the not workings of mm-hmm. the team, as the case may be. There were three people, let's call them Gary, George, and Mary, right? Gary needed George's work product in order to do his job, right? Mm-hmm. His job was built. Gary's job, work product, was built on George's work product. But Gary and George weren't talking to each other. So every time Gary needed George's work product, he'd go to Mary, and Mary would go to George, and Mary would then bring George's work product back to Gary. Mm-hmm. Talk about dysfunction.
Yeah.
Talk about wasted effort. and not just the wasted effort of Mary doing this kind of shuttle diplomacy, but also the wasted effort of I don't know if you've ever been angry at somebody, right? Or I mean, of course
never.
I know, right? But being angry is itself a lot of effort. It's really exhausting. So that gives you a kind of a sense of the level of dysfunction on this team. And we said, all right, like if you really want transformation, this is probably a 3-day training. And he said, all I've got money and bandwidth for right now is 4 hours. And we said, okay, we'll see what we can do. And so we worked with his team for 4 hours, put them through these exercises that I was telling you about, where we're drilling some of the same principles that I was talking about. So celebrating failure, having each other's back. It's always about the relationship. It's never about the thing itself. Doing drills that really get those neurons firing in a new way. And we thought, all right, hope that puts some dent in the problem. 6 months later, we visited this team leader who hired us, and he reported that Gary and George are talking to each other. Mary is no longer in the middle. Team productivity is up by about 30%.
Oh, wow.
And at this point, he shared with us a little bit more intimately about the impact of the problems on his team. He said, I used to go into staff meetings and I was literally nauseous. A few times I actually had to leave the staff meeting to throw up because the animosity in the room was so stressful for me. And he's no longer feeling nauseous in staff meetings. He's picked up his exercise regime again, which he had let go. And that's what we're in business to do.
Nice.
Is to improve people for work and to improve work for people. Now, interestingly, if you were to ask George, because he did, the team leader said to the team, I'd like to bring the Yes Works back. And George said, nobody will get anything out of it except the Yes Works. It was a waste of time. But George's coworkers are happier to be working with George than they used to be. George is actually complaining to his team leader less than he used to. So one of the things that is so effective about habit creating training as opposed to informational training is you don't have to buy into it. You don't have to necessarily work at it in order for it to create an impact. Of course, it'll have a greater impact if you do buy into it, if you do work to employ the training. But because it's habit forming, because it's perspective shifting, sometimes we call what we do Miyagiing, right? Wax on, wax off. Then I throw a few punches at you because you think you've been wasting your time, and the neurons that fire together wire together. So you get the stimulus, and the response is already there in the structure of your brain.
Interesting. What do you see coming along the horizon? What do you see? What do you see happening within corporate and teams, and the need for this type of training?
More and more, work is about experience for people. The things that we buy, the places that we put our attention are about experience. I was talking to a client recently who they had to lay off a huge percentage of their workforce, 20% of their workforce. And the remaining portion of the workforce is feeling demoralized. Not just because their jobs now feel perhaps less certain, but because a large portion of their social experience just walked out the door. Work is more and more where we are getting our human connection. It's always about the relationship. It's never about the thing. We go to work to have an experience of accomplishing things, to have an experience of contributing, to have an experience of affinity with people, and of course, to have an experience of putting food on the table. So it's not, we don't go to work for the paycheck. Nobody does. Even the people who say, yeah, another day, another dollar. The people who think they're going to work for a paycheck, they are hungering for an experience. Mm-hmm. And more, that's going to become critical because people don't go to church as much. People don't spend as much time in the neighborhood. The other places where we may have looked for that human experience are becoming a lesser part of our human experience. Work is becoming a greater and greater part of our human experience. And the reason that Facebook won over its competitors like MySpace and Friendster and other things like that is the experience that it created. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it, really, it's an experience of, in large measure, relationship. Mm-hmm. We know the people who are going to comment on our posts. Yeah. We know the people, even if we have never met them, mm-hmm. right? But we know who they are. We know what we can expect from them. That's part of being in a relationship. And so even while relationships are becoming digital, the in-person relationships are going to become more important. The day of salespeople being a walking brochure are over. Mm-hmm. Now the successful salespeople are going to be those who are good at relationship, and not relationship selling in the old school sense of, hey, let's go play a round of golf, or I'm going to buy you a bunch of drinks over time, and mm-hmm. we're gonna create the facsimile of friendship. And when I say relationship, it doesn't have to be friendship. I've got lots of contacts who I don't think of as friends, but I do think of them as valuable in my business life. They think of me as valuable in their business lives, and we are enriching each other's lives. Now, would I go out for a beer with them? Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. But my life is richer for having them in it. Yeah. Their lives, I hope, are richer for having me in them. And that is the future of business.
Interesting. What's that one question you wish more people would actually ask you?
You know, I knew you were going to ask me that. And this question is not it, because it's a really tough one. And I think actually we got into it when I'm talking about accountability, I'm talking about experience. I don't know exactly what the question is, but the answers have to do with joyful accountability and the experience economy.
Nice. What are some ways for our listeners to connect with you guys? Is there like a websites or social media?
Yes.
How best to connect with you?
We are, the Yes Works is at theyesworks.com. We also have a podcast, which you can find there or on iTunes, called Mighty Good Work, where we, like you are doing, interview people who are doing good work and try to squeeze out of them all the wisdom we can that people can put to practice in their work lives. I am Aaron Schmookler on LinkedIn, and I promise you I'm the only one. And Schmookler is Schmookler.
Excellent. Any other parting words of wisdom or anything else that's on your heart to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think one really important piece of wisdom that is useful to me to remind myself of, and it's great that I have clients who need reminders of this as well, because every time I remind somebody of this, it's reinforcing for me that though you don't necessarily have to achieve whatever perfection is in your mind, striving for it is always worthwhile. The idea that that's just the way things are, or we've always done it this way, is the beginning of the end. And it's always enlivening to be striving for more. And that's part of the experience that makes people get up and want to go to work, is the striving for more. And it's comfortable. People will say, day in and day out, they will say, that's not me, that's not my personality, that's not how we do it, because striving is uncomfortable. But it's always rewarding. And like we were talking about the teachers that we really appreciate, the supervisors that we really appreciate, the people that we really appreciate in our lives are the ones who help to invite us out of that comfort zone where we are complacent because it's comfortable and into the striving. And the striving may be a roller coaster. But to go back again to A.J. Puentes and his definition of miracle, when you can shift your perspective from a roller coaster is scary to a roller coaster is exciting, life and work get better.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. I greatly appreciate it. I know I got a lot out of this, and definitely looking forward. We see each other in a lot of social circles and business circles. Anyways, but I always enjoy seeing you, and always just looking forward to the next time we get to interact with each other.
Well, thank you, Greg. I want to say to you about this conversation, I really appreciate you. These are some of I think, the best, this is some of the best job I've done at articulating some of this. Mm-hmm. This is complex, wonderful stuff. And you have brought out some of the best in me. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that.